Do I hate black people? That's what he asked me. And after getting to know him, I came up with this conclusion. His name was Hog Slayer. And by the end of this video, I want you, the viewer, to share in the comment sections if you think he was actually racist or something else. He dropped the N-word like his mama's name. He was a redneck from deep in the Florida swamp. And he said, I really started hating black people when I went to prison. And I had to work with this dude. I had to listen to his stories day after day. Him complaining about he hated black people and what black people did him and the injustices black people did him. And the more I listened to his story, the more I had sympathy for him. I'm wondering if you, the viewer, feel the same way. This is crazy. I had to work with him in the oil and gas field. He moved from Florida after he got out of prison to Louisiana. And the reason he got the name Hog Slayer is because he found out that he can get jobs in the oil and gas field in Louisiana, and he thought that his criminal record wouldn't follow him from Florida. So the company that I worked for, a place that he worked at before I started working there, he kept showing up at the company with dead animals in the back of his truck. And the company kept saying, man, why you got all those dead raccoons in the back of your truck? And he used to talk like this. He said, oh, cousin, I'm going to eat them dead raccoons, cousin. If you want, man, I'll skin you one up and bring it here later. Tastes better than chicken. And they're like, nah, man, you can't be bringing that over here. That thing's nasty. You got to put that on ice. But he didn't understand that. Anyway, one day he showed up at the company. And after he kept showing up time and time again, they respected his dedication to the pursuit of getting a job in the oil and gas field. So the company I worked for said, yeah, we're going to hire this dude. But the day that they hired him, he got a job and he went to work in Monsanto plant. If you know anything about Monsanto, they're considered one of the world's worst enemies. A lot of the world don't like them because of all the chemicals that they produce and the chemicals that they put in people's foods and the chemicals that they release into the environment. A lot of people are against it. Well, he went to Monsanto here in Louisiana on River Road in the Bayou country. And when he came back from Monsanto, he had ran into a feral hog. That's right. That's how he got the name Hog Slayer. He hit the hog. He threw the hog in the back of his pickup truck at the end of the job. And he went to the office and he pulled out a butcher knife and a saw and he started chopping the hog up. And he tried to give the hind leg quarter to one of the owners of the company. And they said, man, are you crazy? Where'd you get that hog from? He said, oh, cousin, when they all sent me to do that there job up in Monsanto, he said, I was riding up in there, you know what I mean, pissed off in the world like I always am. And he said, daggone feral hog jumped in from my truck and boom, boom. He said, I hit him. And all of a sudden, my neck jacked. And I said, oh, man, that there feral hog's still squealing out there on the ground. And he said, I jumped up there in my pickup truck. He grabbed my bow and knife. He said, I went and stuck him right in the side of the neck. The hog let out a voice. And he said, I'll put him in back my truck. He said, I'm going to eat that later. And I'm going to eat that there later. And I'm going to feed some of that there to my dogs. That's really how this dude talked. And the owner of the company said, man, did you get the job done? Because that's all the owner of the oil and gas field care about. If you're a convicted felon or you crazy, you can get a job in the oil and gas field. I do videos on that too. You have to go check out my library. I'll put it in the link in the description. But anyway, he got the job. And that's how they started calling him Hog Slayer, because he showed up and showed the owner of the company a dead hog he had, cut a hind leg quarter off and tried to give it to the owner of the company. Of course, the owner of the company didn't take it. Anyway, I get a job at the oil and gas field at this same company. And he's already been working there like 6 or 7 months before I start working there. And he's the one who's training me. So they sent me to train with him. He always had vehicle issues. You know, he's one of those dudes. So he had vehicle issues and his vehicle was always broken. Something didn't work. Flat tire, battery don't work. His friend down the road had to use the car to take his grandma's friend's cousin to the hospital. And they asked me to go pick him up from his house. I lived in New Orleans. He lived in Chalmette. I drove to Chalmette where the refineries were. I picked him up. He gets in my car. And that's when I get to know him. And that's when he starts complaining about black people. That's right. He's dropping the N-bomb as soon as he gets in my car. Oh, cousin. Where you stay at? You stay in New Orleans, I heard, man. They get full of N-words all over New Orleans, huh? I sure wouldn't get well too around them. I said, man, yeah, really? And so I'm just listening to him, and he's talking. So come to find out, he been to prison. Well, he don't know that I also been to prison. So he's telling me, you know what I mean? Oh, cousin, reason I don't like black folk, man, because when I was in prison, man, I was always fighting black people. I said, you was always fighting black people in prison? He said, yeah, cousin, they always trying to test you, take your food, your manhood, your booty. He said, I had to fight and punch them in their mouth all the time, man. It's the thing I don't respect about black people, right? And I don't like them so much. He said, because they always wanted to jump me. Them damn Florida Crips, man, I ain't got no respect for them. I ain't never had a one-on-one. He said, every time I bust one in their mouth, oh, cousin, they'd just go ahead and jump me. He said, man, they never could catch me one-on-one. I said, yeah. I said, man, why they jumped you all the time? I said, man, because you crazy? He said, oh, cousin, I ain't crazy, man. He said, I fight black people all the time because black people just don't like me. The way I look, he ain't had two front teeth were missing. So when he used the word cousin, it always go like that. You know what I mean? Them two front teeth were missing from it. And so I'm like, yeah, so I hear they call you Hog Slayer. He said, oh, yeah. He said, I don't take much personal that. He said, they call me that Hog Slayer over that company, man, because I had that hog in the back of my truck. I said, yeah, so it's cool if I call you Hog Slayer. He said, oh, yeah, cousin, that's cool. You know what I mean? So I started calling him Hog Slayer. We go work. He's trying to train me. This dude cuts corner after corner. He does the job wrong. Good thing I didn't pay attention to do my job after him. But let me go back for a second, because something I forgot to tell you was whenever he killed that hog at Monsanto by hitting it in his car and he threw it in the back of his truck, he literally left a trail of blood from the refinery to the office where we worked at to drop his paperwork off. So there was literally a trail of blood all around River Road from the refinery to the office, and the police officers came to the office and they're like, dang, what's all this blood? And they said, that dude hit a hog. And you know what I mean? The owners of the company talked to cops and all that, not to talk to Monsanto. It was just an accident. Dude had a hog. They had him come back out there with a pressure washer. He was pissed off. Oh, cousin, man, where I come from, man, ain't no big deal, man. Trail of blood, man, for no hog or roadkill, man. It don't mean nothing, man. No cutting, man. That's how he talked. And they made him pressure wash and clean out. The dude was pissed off. You know what I mean? But anyway, now I'm working with him. Come to find out, I'm getting a little personal with him. I'm trying to find out why old boy went to prison, right? And he's telling me, I said, man, why'd you go to jail? He said, oh, cousin. He said, man. And for somebody who was always fighting Florida Crips, he sure dropped cuz a lot. He said, oh, cuz. He said, man, they got me down bad. I said, how they got you down bad? He said, man, I ain't never been in trouble in my life. He said, Dad, don't fund wildlife and fisheries. They always after me. I said, the wildlife and fisheries got you? He said, yeah, cuz. He said, wildlife and fisheries got me down bad, man. I said, how they got you down bad? He said, oh, cuz. And they tried to say I had about 2 miles of illegal trout line ran. I said, dang, you had 2 miles of illegal trout line ran? He said, oh, cuz, I probably had more than 2 miles. He said, but man, he said, I catching them catfish and everything. He said, I ain't no big deal, man. They gonna tell me I got it. He said, I ain't had no fishing license. I said, you ain't had no fishing license? He said, oh, cuz, I ain't had nothing. So when the wildlife and fisheries went to his house, old boy had turtles stacked up in his house. He was making turtle soup. He had raccoons. He had gators and everything. And so this dude was doing all kind of illegal poaching and hunting all throughout the state of Florida. And they gave him like a 10-year prison sentence because that's just how many wildlife animals he had in his garage and in his yard in Florida when they busted him. And so they gave the dude like a 10-year sentence. He had all kind of charges: illegal trout line, illegal hunting, illegal eggs. He had all kind of things. This dude was a menace, right, to the environment and a menace to all wildlife in Florida and Louisiana for that matter, because I'm about to tell you what he did. So I get a job one day, right? And so I get a job and I go to this dude's house. I have to pick him up. And when I go to pick him up, I got a truck and I have been working with him for like a month now. And now he's comfortable with me. And I pull up and he says, oh, cuz, say, man. He said, say, cuz, I got a boat. He said, I just got a motor. Dude had in his garage, he had a P-Rog with a P-Rog skiff and a motor, a little motor hooked up. And it's late at night, he pulls out these big flashlights, big head flashlights, because we use a lot of that work on the river, on the barges. And he hands me one. He said, me and you, cuz, night, after we get off, because we were going off at midnight. Our shift starts at midnight, but we're going to get off. He said, at midnight, we going hunting. I said, we going hunting? He said, you got the truck, I got the boat, cuz. He said, I'm going to toss the boat in the back of your truck. And I said, yeah? He said, yeah. And so he looks, and I look at him. I said, what we going to hunt? We going fishing? He said, nah, we going to hunt gators. I said, man, you need a license in Louisiana to hunt alligators. He said, oh, cousin, I know a spot where there ain't no police, ain't no po-pos, cuz, and there ain't no wildlife and fisheries. I said, man, you got me messed up. I said, I ain't going to jail for no hunting no illegal alligators outside of season, right? And so anyway, we sitting there talking after I declined him, and he wasn't happy that I declined him. I wasn't gonna go hunting no alligators illegally with him. And so the dude noticed on my phone, it's the first time he noticed the picture, right? And you got to think, I've been working for him for a month, and this dude been talking about black folks left and right. And so he sees the phone on my picture. My wife's black, right? And he sees the picture, and he's like, "Oh, cuz," he said, "you got a black wife? That's your old lady?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, man, damn, cuz, I feel bad." I said, "Man, don't feel no, look, be who you gonna be." You know what I mean? I said, "That's how you feel? Your experience was you got jumped." You know what I mean? He said, "Oh, man," he said, "Man, can I talk real with you, cuz?" I said, "Man, you've been talking real with me. You don't have to change now." Here's something, being married to someone outside your race. I don't feel like I got to make a disclaimer to everybody I meet. Say, by the way, my wife is of a different ethnicity. I don't have to make no disclaimer to that. And I'm not going to do that. Be who you're going to be no matter what. Sometimes when people find stuff out, they act sideways on you. So anyway, he sees that and he starts opening up to me. He starts feeling bad. You could tell he was thinking back to those conversations. I'm like, "Look, man, your experience is your experience. You know what I mean? Say what you want to say how you feel, and that's just it. You know what I mean? We got a job to do as long as we do our job, but you ain't going to get me to do no illegal activity neither." So anyway, this dude apologizes to me. Cool, whatever. So come to find out, you know what I mean? This is when he asked me that serious question. He says, "Do you think I'm racist, cuz?" I said, "Man, look, everything you've been talking about is basically racism, you know what I mean? So yeah, you racist, obviously, right?" He said, "Oh, cuz," he said, "I've been struggling with it, man." He says, "It ain't that I don't like black folks, man. I just have bad experience with black folks, cuz." And I said, "Yeah?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "So I won't be honest with you." He said, "I don't kind of consider myself racist. I consider myself prejudiced." He said, "I ain't going to say I'm racist. I'm never going to say that I'm racist. I'm just going to say that I'm prejudiced. Like, I think black folks should stick with black folks and white folks should stick with white folks." I said, "Cool. I can respect that. Whatever." You know what I mean? So he's asking me, what do I think? So I was honest with old boy. I said, "I think you racist, bro." You know what I mean? But look, I was in prison, so I know what you're saying. When I was in prison, probably 90% of the fights I got into was against black dudes. You know what I mean? And so, I got in some fights with white dudes, but mostly I fought black dudes. And something else I learned in prison, you know what I mean? When whites are outnumbered, of course, blacks are going to crowd them and jump them. Now you're going to look, I had black dudes who I stood on business with, who we dealt fight side by side. We had each other's back, you know what I mean? So not all black folks operate that way, you know what I mean? So he was kind of off about that, but I told the dude he was racist, you know what I mean? But I did have sympathy for him. So let me tell you what happens to this dude. Eventually, this dude left Florida, and he was on probation and parole, right, from Florida, but he never checked in with his parole officer. And when he got out of prison, he had some other questionable stuff about some unalive bodies popping up around Florida that they tried to pin on this dude. So they came to Louisiana looking for him. Well, he was also renting a house in Chalmette from the owner of the company that I worked for, right? Because the owners had, the owners got a lot of money, you know what I mean? They got a lot of property. They smart people, right? They investors. So he's renting one of their properties. Well, this dude got dogs at his house. So he all of a sudden skips town out of nowhere. And when he skips town out of nowhere, they go to his house, and the two dogs that he had, they find the two dogs in the backyard half buried. Dude dug quick holes. I guess he figured he couldn't keep the dogs with him because he wouldn't be able to afford and support these dogs. So they were about halfway buried. One of the dog's paws was sticking out the ground. The other one's tail and part of his nose was sticking out the ground. And they uncovered them in a makeshift grave with two dogs. When they dug them up, they had two .22 shots in the backyard. He had popped each dog in the head with the .22. You know what I mean? And just buried the dogs, and he left the house crazy. They had like chicken blood in the house. You know what I mean? They had all kind of animals. They found raccoon paws. You know what I mean? Alligator skulls. You know what I mean? Dude had an acid bag full of animal parts. He was selling dog skulls. He was selling alligator skulls, everything. This dude was hustling still in Louisiana. So I don't ever know what happened to the Hog Slayer. The last thing I ever remember talking to the Hog Slayer about is it was during Halloween time. And he was all into Halloween. And he was in the horror movie characters. And he shows me these pictures. He said, "Oh, cousin, what you thinking of that?" And looking back at it, it was blood. And he was dressed up like as a scientist, right? And he was like in his lab. He said, "This is what I'm going out at." And now I'm realizing that the blood that he showed me in the picture was actually from animals that he had slaughtered illegally in Louisiana. So the Hog Slayer was, you know what I mean? He was definitely an interesting character. But I'm curious on what you think now. Share in the comments. From hearing his story, do you have sympathy for him that he felt this way about black folks now that you know that when he was in prison, he used to get jumped a lot by black folks, you know. And listen, you could have your feelings, whatever it is, share in the comments. You could say you hate this dude, you think this dude's terrible, whatever. That's your opinion, you know what I mean? But I started to have sympathy for him because I've been to prison and I know what it's like to have to fight, you know, and get jumped by somebody just because you're white. You know what I mean? So there's the reverse racism too. You know what I mean? Because black people could be racist too. But anyway, man, thanks for watching the Pen and Shank, the most unusual and unique prison and crime related channel on all of YouTube. And we about to blow this thing up. We just getting started. Give me a like and subscribe and go check out my other videos. Let's get it.